Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. In today's video, I want to talk about 10 underrated legendaries in this game that probably don't get as much love as they probably should. And I'm going to explain to you guys how to use each one or where I see each one fitting in the game. Hopefully, if you have one of these champions, they're definitely worth considering. So I want to view these champions from a lens of whether they are worth the investment and how good they are in their particular area of content. So let's jump right into it. All right, so hopping into the first champion I want to talk about is Kaeya the Rai. So Kaeya the Rai was a guaranteed Deck of Fate champion. I believe she was 20 Sacred Shards when she was available. She was available in tandem with Timid the Fool, which was the fusion at the time. Kaeya is way better than Timid as a standalone champion. She gets better with him and he gets a lot better with her. But basically she's a really good mix of support abilities. She has the Terminator boost with the soft cleanse. Generally remove 2 random debuffs is pretty much a cleanse for most PvE content. Then places block debuffs, which is really solid. So she mixes this up on a 3 turn, which is really nice. She also has the pretty standard AoE 4 turn team revive with a little bit of extra damage here as well. Half HP, half turn meter, which is pretty standard as well. And then she has an A1, which is pretty standard again, 10% max HP heal. She has an interesting passive here where she has some kind of soft immunity against Terminator control against herself. It's not super relevant most of the time in PvE, but in PvP, like arena settings, it can be okay. Great aura, great base speed on her. She's a great lead. If you pull her early, she's actually not bad. She's actually pretty good, actually. Obviously, with the team revive and then boosting and cleansing. Very solid champion. I think she doesn't get talked about as much. The great base speed also makes her a great candidate to be a lead in your arena teams as well. So definitely deserves a look if you pulled her somewhere along your progression. Coming up next, I'm going to highlight a past fusion from the High Elves. It's going to be Stratos Island. Well, when he first was announced as a fusion, I think most people were kind of lukewarm on him. They weren't really high on this guy at all. I mean, aesthetically, he looks kind of plainish. And his kit is kind of plain, but it's super solid. And in actual gameplay, he covers a lot of bases. So his aura is an accuracy in all battles. That's awesome. It's just a standard good aura. He brings ally protection, increased defense, as well as counterattack and a shield. So he's a good candidate to be a mischief tank because he overbuffs himself relative to the rest of your team. So you can build him with high resistance and then he will bait the head of mischief into trying to steal the buffs from him. In which case, if you have sufficient resistance, he will resist the mischief steal. So that's really good. It's on a standard 4-turn cooldown there. You got a 3-turn cooldown AoE decrease speed as well as a decrease of enemy buffs. It's actually pretty good. Again, for Hydra, this is a very good Hydra champion, but both of these abilities are actually very strong for just general content, wave-based content. He's a great support. A1 provoke, chance to provoke, double hit. So it's a decent chance to provoke here. Again, good for Hydra. He's a specifically made for Hydra champion, but he can be very good in just general content. He has a passive that boosts his healing based on his defense, and then he also heals allies under ally protection. So he's just an awesome general support. Really high base defense, 1520 for him. He doesn't get talked about a lot, but I love this guy. I actually use him as kind of like a tank carry for one of my lower Hydra teams, and he does the job perfectly good just by himself. So he definitely deserves a shout out from me in this video. All right, after that, let's head over to the Ogryn tribes. We got Shamrock here. Shamrock definitely deserves a shout out. His value definitely increased when Hydra came into the picture. Again, he has a very standard, very good accuracy in all battles, aura, very good, usable. He has a 4-turn decreased speed AoE as well as a turn meter fill. He also has a decreased turn meter, so for non-boss content is also very solid here. Going into his A2, he has the increased defense, increased speed on a 3-turn. Very good. He has some conditional revive on death and continuous heals for members that are more damage, for example. His A1 does some buff stealing, which is again good for Hydra. In general, his kit's very good for Hydra. He might not be your full-time decreased speed champion, but he also mixes in a turn meter boost here, which is actually pretty solid. Although it is conditional and it is a smaller boost, it's still quite good. And he also mixes in the increased defense, increased speed, as well as some other buffs here based on conditions. Very good champion, brings a lot to Hydra teams. He can definitely support any Hydra team very well. He also brings increased defense, which actually is not super common on good champions that have obviously other uses for Hydra. In general content, he's okay. He brings some turn meter reduction, turn meter boosting against enemy waves, and then brings some survivability with the revive on death, increased defense, and then continuous heal. The aura in all battles is obviously very, very good for dungeon crawling. So Shamrock is definitely worth it. In terms of overall books, he does take a decent amount of books, so I'm not a huge fan of that. 10 books. You probably want to land one here for sure, and then maybe you can avoid this one just for like general crawling. But if you're going to use him for endgame content, then he's definitely going to be worth booking. Just 10 books for sure. Even his A1 is actually quite decent. But yeah. All right, hopping over to the Barbarian faction. Let's talk about Elder Scar. Elder Scar is one of those champions that I have like a bit of history with. He's one of my first legendaries I ever pulled, and I definitely vaulted him for way too long. So the big thing about Elder Scar is that he has this 3-turn cooldown HP burn. It doesn't require any books for this to work. I could have used this move when I was climbing through Lower Spider. Definitely would have helped me out there, but I didn't realize what I had in my vault. But Elder Scar is definitely worth considering to use if you don't have a solid HP burn champion. So make sure you guys check him out if you guys have him. He might be in your vault and stuff. He can be geared out for damage, but you can just give him a little bit of accuracy so he can land all his debuffs. He has some decent wave control with the fears and provokes. He's supposed to be a damage dealer, but in practical sense, you probably just don't book him out and then just give him some accuracy and then let him play some fears, let him play some burns, and then that's pretty much it for Elder Scar. But I think he doesn't get talked about too often, but he's definitely a solid champion. Definitely underrated. All right, let's hop to the Sacred Order here. So I'm going to talk about Arrow. I don't really like single purpose like nuker champions with not really much going for him. But Arrow has 1674 base attack. It's actually really like high for just a non-void legendary or non-mythical legendary. And he was buffed along the way. But he actually hits super hard. His A3, his A2 both hit super hard. Look how much damage this guy gets from books. 45% damage from his books. Definitely worth booking up. 45 damage from his books here. He hits super hard. Obviously the problem with him is that he's Force Affinity. I don't know if that's a problem as a nuker, but I think that is a problem, especially if you're running into Duchess and all that stuff. And obviously standalone nukers with no real way to survive is a bit of a problem. Attack in all battles, very solid. A1 has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit. That's not a big deal, but yeah, most of his draw is going to be in his AoE slam here as well as his big slam here. So if you draw Arrow kind of early, he's actually going to be one of your best damage dealers, and depending on how many books you have, he might actually be worth damage since each book is going to boost his damage significantly. I want to highlight him a little bit. He is a bit of an underrated champion. He doesn't get much love, but he does hit super hard. And definitely worth calling out as an underrated champion. All right, hopping over to the Night Revenants. I have, what are we doing here? I have Mother Cybele. Actually, that's pretty underrated. Initially she was one of the fusions that I didn't want to do. I believe she was a traditional fusion, and at that time I was kind of like, I don't really want to do her. The biggest knack against her is that she takes quite a bit of books. I believe 16, 3, 6 there, 9, 12. Oh, not that much. 12. 6. Anyways, 12 books, so not that much. But I thought it was a bit more. Does she have any books here? No. Okay, so 12 books, not as much as I thought. But initially I didn't really want to do her because her kit was kind of weird and didn't really seem like it would be that useful. But you know what? Her A1 decreased speed AoE is at one of the best AoE decreased speeds in the game. Also has a little bit of a turn meter fill here. She also has some revive on death shenanigans here on a 3-turn cooldown. You can get her to do some teams for Sand Devil as well with this revive on death move. So it's like a non-nut team, for example. You can definitely use her in that role. You don't need a Neri, of course. I do run a team with Mother Cybele. It's like about a 90-second team with two Septimus. But any max HP damage dealer could work as well with Mother Cybele. This move, not super good, but it can have some use, especially if you're slugging through faction wars or some harder content, maybe Centranos or something. Her passive, not again situational, but her biggest draw is the A1 decreased speed, extremely strong against Hydra. Pair her with a curse set or provoke set, and then she becomes basically a machine gun with her A1, just spamming the AoE provokes and AoE hexes. So very, very cool champion. Also brings the speed in all battles, the best speed in all battles aura. Has incredible base speed. Definitely underrated, but I guess she's been getting a little bit more spotlight recently. But personally, I feel she's probably one of the least liked fusions back in the day, just because of her level of difficulty when doing her fusion, as well as her really weird kit. I remember not a lot of people liked her, but I ended up doing her because I got two of the epics from shards, and I was like, okay, I'll finish her off or whatever. But she ended up being very useful for me. So if you got her, you guys definitely give her a look. At some content. She's definitely very, very good in Hydra and of course Sand Devil as well. All right, hopping over to the Dark Elves, I got Maranx here. She used to be a fusion as well, I believe a traditional one. Again, she wasn't super sought after or hyped up, but I figured that she had something kind of special on her kit. She brings decreased defense and a hex on a 3-turn on one move, which is actually really, really good, especially for Hydra. You can also use her as just an AoE decreased defense champion. The knock against her is that she's a damage dealer, so she's a little bit low on HP, a little bit squishy, not insane base attack or anything like that. She does bring a little bit of, she does bring some survivability with the, she has a move here that places unkillable on this champion. Yeah, if it kills an enemy without hex. So she does bring a little bit of survivability there, but she brings 2 AoEs. And then she brings a little bit of an extra hit mechanic here on her A1. So she can deal a little bit of damage for you for Hydra. I think she's a very good damage dealer. She also brings some utility as well. So definitely worth a look if you guys are struggling for Hex champions or struggling for Cursed gear or struggling for a decreased defense champion. Like I said, she brings a bit of damage. So it's kind of nice to have a decreased defense damage dealer as well. With some added utility with the hex. I mean, you could even put her in maybe a curse set, I guess. If you go curse set, you have multi-hit A1s. Sorry, not curse set, provoke set. You have multi-hit A1s and then you have double AoE here. So she could even be a viable provoke champion. But I guess if you're going to gear her up for damage, you might as well just go for the full damage route and give her savage or lethal as well. But definitely underrated champion. She doesn't get talked about very often, but definitely can find some use in some teams, especially for endgame Hydra teams. All right, moving on to the Dwarves faction. So in the Dwarves faction, we got Goffred. I really like this guy. I think he's definitely underrated. He doesn't require any books to do his job, which is basically this one, active effect. If an ally is killed by a fatal hit, block incoming damage on them, and then you have a chance to stun them as well. You don't require books for that to happen, the block damage part. So technically he can kind of save one of your champions, similar to how Sigmund saves himself on his passive. Goffred has the ability to save any one of your teammates with this passive alone, but don't underestimate him because he can also do increased defense as well on a 3-turn, and then he has a soft cleanse for the decreased defense and weaken. He also brings in 3-turn cooldown AoE 100% stun, which is really, really annoying. And actually pretty good just for general wave content. His A1 also brings a provoke and a decreased defense as well, double hit. So this champion definitely has utility beyond just his passive. Good base stats for a defense-based champion. Not going to hit super hard, but he brings good utility throughout most of the content. You definitely don't want books in here. So you definitely want some books in there and in here as well. and then books in here if you can. But if you're just going to use him, you can use him with no books as well. Just use him for his block damage, or use him for a 1-turn 75% stun, which is super solid as well. So good champion, definitely not talked about very often, and definitely deserves to be on a underrated list. All right, up next we got Skinwalker here, heading on to Snicktrack. So Snicktrack's here, great looking champion, by the way, porcupine style with the armor, love it. He can be good in many areas. His A1 has a decreased attack, which is good for clan boss, for example. He has a 3-turn cooldown, AoE decrease speed, 100% chance, as well as a shield, 30% of his HP, which is awesome. Very good protection champion here. Decrease speed, very good, especially against Hydra, for example. And you can use the shield portion of this move for a clan boss, for example. His A3 brings the 3-turn cooldown ally protection and then a reflect damage on your whole team. The reflect damage not super relevant most of the time, but the ally protection is very good. Paired with his passive that places leech as well, means that you can definitely use him for clan boss. You can use him for basically all content. He's going to be really good against a lot of bosses as well, just to protect your team. Decreased attack, decreased speed, and then reflect and ally protection here. Very good HP in all battles. Great base stats actually for this champion. A little bit low on the speed, but the HP and the defense very solid. Good resistance, good accuracy, a little bit of bonus there as well. Snicktrack doesn't get talked about too often, but he brings a lot in his kit, and he's actually very good. Even for Hydra, he can be very good as well, placing the leech and decreased speed, decreased attack here as well, and protecting your team. So very good champion, definitely deserving to be on this list. All right, guys, that brings us to our last champion on the list. This is not a definitive complete list. It's just 10 champions that I feel are a little bit underrated, and we should take a longer look at them, especially if your roster is not fully fleshed out. Let's hop into the Dark Elves one more time, and I'm going to go with a login champion here, Visix. Visix had a really bad reputation for a long time. I mean, rightfully so. She was one of the worst void legendaries in the game. And how many people have quit after pulling a void shard? Their first void legendary ends up being a Visix. I cannot count the amount of posts and threads that I've seen where people quit the game because they pulled Visix as their first void legendary. But Visix definitely got buffed up over the years, and now she's actually very good. I think we all know she is very good, but she maintains her level of goodness even into the end game. For example, for Hydra use, for example, right? She dominates her faction wars. She has a defense and all in faction crypts. Although I don't like this aura, this just makes sure that she dominates her faction wars. She has AoE 3-turn provoke with the shield on herself to give her a little bit of a boost, just in case she gets hit. 3-turn, 1 book only. This one, she has a 3-turn AoE decreased speed and an ally protection. Protects your team, and then debuffs the entire enemy wave. Very strong just for wave-based content, but now we have Hydra in the mix, which is the endgame content right now, and then we have the decreased speed on them, which is very important. So you have this on a 3-turn cooldown, 100% chance. Very good ability. Her A1, not going to be useful against bosses or anything like that, except, of course, normal Fire Knight is going to be very good. She's kind of like Armiger-esque, so normal spiders, she can be very good. And then Dark Fae, she can be very good as well with a turn meter drop here on the A1. It is a double hit, so it does kind of work against Fire Knight normal, for example, so she does get used. So in terms of where she's going to get used, she's going to get used in any wave-based content. You see her in endgame, some endgame Hydra teams, for example. Does bring the ally protection, decrease speed, and then provoke. I mean, what other champion does that? Krisk does that. Decrease speed, ally protection, provoke. Krisk does that. Obviously, she's not Krisk, but she brings a lot of elements that are very strong. She should never be overlooked in a lot of content. So definitely deserving to be on any underrated list. I think she is still underrated by a lot of people, but definitely giving her some love here on this list. All right, folks, there you have it. That's going to be my 10 underrated champions list. They're not the top 10. I'm sure there's more. I have about 15 here that I feel are underrated, but of those 15 or so, I picked 10 to talk about. Let me know in the comments below what you think is underrated right now. And I mean, obviously, what's underrated to me might not be underrated to you. So let's keep the discussion positive. I feel underrated champions do promote some pretty good discussion, and it's a good way for other people to learn and maybe find some diamonds in the rough in their vaults. So let me know in the comments below, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.